One of the things I really appreciate about Mercedes-Benz is something I call engineering predictability. And by that I mean Mercedes doesn't just change things for the sake of change. Particularly their rear suspension. Their basic independent rear suspension was the same on almost all their models from the late 1960s up until the late 1980s. So in this video I'm going to cover some of the basic inspection points that you want to perform on your own Mercedes in relationship to the rear suspension. As I mentioned in my front suspension video, we're talking rubber parts here. Many of these rubber parts wear out over time, so if they're older than 18 to 20 years, then you probably need to replace them. Take a look here at what I call the center differential mount. It's located right behind the rear differential and is mounted to the subframe. If your car is experiencing rear end sag, this is one of the common parts that you may want to replace. The next key rubber component to check is the subframe mount bushings, which are located right at the front of this subframe mount arm. These large round rubber parts do wear out, and when they do, you can get looseness in the rear end, hard to align rear ends, and also sagging rear ends. We offer a kit with these mounts on our website, which includes instructions on how to install them yourself. The rear trailing arm that you see here is attached to the rear subframe at two key points, here and here, with a large bolt and a rubber bushing. These bushings are a common wear point, and when they wear, the car will have a hard time maintaining a straight track. In some cases, it may even want to change lanes on you unexpectedly, primarily because this trailing arm is moving. Inspect your axle boots. Go ahead and twist them and look for signs of cracking and any leaks. If you notice here, it looks like we've got a leak coming out of the rear end seal, but if you look more closely, we've actually got a leak coming out of the fuel hose, which I'll have to replace later. We do have kits that will allow you to replace these boots if they are broken or leaking. These rear ends are equipped with a rear sway bar, and it's attached to the subframe by these two brackets and rubber bushings. So you'll want to inspect the rubber bushings on both corners of the sway bar. At the end of the sway bar, there's a sway bar link that attaches the sway bar to the trailing arm. This is a very common wear item. If you look closely here, we've got movement and even a clunking sound. So these sway bar links will need to be replaced. I'm making some notes on some of the things I'm going to need to replace on this 126. But there's one other thing I want to check, and that's the shock absorbers. And it's really hard to inspect shock absorbers visually. Although you'll note in this case I have a leaking one on the left side, so that's an obvious replacement. The best way to check shock absorbers is to remove them and check them manually. You can also do it by driving if you've had experience with Mercedes shock absorbers before. I hope you enjoyed this video on rear suspension components. Stay tuned for more videos to come, and be sure and check out my website.